Welcome to Advanblack's YouTube channel. I'm Steve, service technician for Avanblack, and today I'm going to be showing you something brand new that Advanblack has come out with. We've had several requests for it. Things happen, you get chips in your paint, and you need a touch-up pen. So on the launch of this paint pen, I just wanted to quickly get a video out to you to show you how to use it and what you can expect from a paint pen. Now, if you've used touch-up paint before in the past, you'll already know that it's never, ever going to be 100%. You can put as much paint in there and sand and buff and all that good stuff, and it's never going to be 100%. It is a touch-up pen. It's just for filling in little scratches and little rock chips and stuff like that that we encounter on the motorcycles as we ride. Now with this paint pen, there's a couple of different ways that you can apply the paint. Today I'm going to show you exactly how we use these touch-up paint pens. When we're talking about paint pens and covering in scratches and rock chips on metal surfaces like metal fenders and things like that, you're basically just wanting to stop the rust process. You're going to scrape out any rust that may be in there, you're going to touch it up, and that's going to actually stop the rusting process. If it's not exposed to the elements, it can't rust. So that's one of the biggest things that you want to use a touch-up pen for on metal objects, is to stop that rust. If you're talking about any kind of plastic products that are on the market, you can use this stuff on your stock stuff too. You can order one of these paint pens and touch up your stock or OEM outer fairing. This is a color match from Advanblack, so we're going to have all of the colors that we have listed on the website available to get in the pen. I have several different ones here today, but our bikes are charcoal, pearl, and amber whiskey, so we're going to use these for an example today on how we touch stuff up. If you've never used a paint touch-up pen or brush in the past, you kind of need to know how to use it and what to expect at the end result. If we're talking about large, deep scratches that are all the way down to the ABS or all the way down to the metal, there is a brush in here that you can use. Now, I suggest that you take this a little bit farther, get a little bit more comfortable with what you're doing, because if you're using that brush, it really kind of puts the paint on, and you're going to have to be able to wet sand that and polish that back out to make that look better. Usually the brushes I use as last case scenario. On the top cap of the brush, there is a push to release paint pin. It's a very fine detailed pin, and when you push that little ball in, it's going to release a little bit of paint. That is what we use generally for rock chips, little scratches, and things that you may pick up while riding. You can unscrew this, however, and you can see that there is a brush. It's very similar to like a fingernail polish brush. It's about the same size. So like I said, that's great for filling in large scratches, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to do more than just fill that in and walk away. You can just fill it in and walk away, that's completely up to you, but if you want it to look its best, you are gonna have to dabble in a little bit of wet sanding and a little bit of polishing, like I said before. So now on the table, we have a couple of old parts that we pulled out of a box down there that I know had some rock chips and stuff in it, so that's what we're gonna use as an example today. On this one, we have a scratch on the outer edge here. We got a couple of rock chips down here, and on the side of this fender extension, we got a pretty good gouge here that is from who knows where. It's been on there forever. This is the OEM fender extension, and I have no idea how that got in there, but today we're going to work on a couple of these places and try to get them looking as best as we can. Like I said, if you use the paint brush, because you have such a large scratch, it's almost 100% guaranteed that you need to do a little bit of wet sanding and some polishing to get that cleaned up, because it is just a paintbrush, and we know that our parts that we buy, our cars and our trucks and our motorcycles, they're not painted with a paintbrush. So when you do it with a paintbrush, it looks like you did it with a paintbrush, so you need to clean that up. When you receive the touch-up pen, this is what you're going to get. Of course, we've already had this up in the camera, but it's going to be listed on the side. All the touch-up pens look exactly the same, Advanblack touch-up paint, and then right below that it'll be listed what color it is. Like I said, eventually we'll have every single paint color that we do. It's over 100 right now. I think they're still working on the hard candy colors because of the metal flake that's inside of that paint. It's very hard to get it in there and then get that big metal flake to come out of that little bitty tip. So what we're gonna do is get the camera over here. I'll try to get it zoomed in on these holes so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But what we're gonna do is kind of like the stage one, what we were talking about, just getting some paint on it to either A, stop that rust, or just cover up that unsightly scratch. And then we'll go from there on a different scratch, and we'll actually do a little bit of wet sanding and polishing to get it as smooth looking as we can. But remember, like I said in the past, I've seen top dollar paint correction people come in on $1 million cars and touch up, and at the end of the day, you can still see it if you're looking for it. It is just a touch-up pen. It's not going to give you a 100% smooth, it was never there scratched area. It is what it is. So you need to be aware of that when you use a touch-up pen. So the absolute first thing that you're gonna do when you get your paint pen is shake it up. You hear this little ball in there? There's a little metal ball in there that's actually stirring the paint. These things sit on the shelf once they're prepared and ready to ship. By the time we get them to you, they need to be shook. So make sure that you spend about a minute getting this paint mixed up very well. Now hopefully, I got this up in camera because my lights are kind of glaring all over this color, but we got a pretty good scratch right here, and that's the one that we're gonna be working on. So I'll pull this back up here when we're done, and we'll give it a look. So the first thing you wanna do is just take some kind of cleaner and make sure that you have any bugs or anything like that, everything completely clean. You don't wanna feel anything on the painted surface. Once we get it smooth, we're gonna use some 91% rubbing alcohol. I'm just gonna put that on the rag. We're gonna clean that entire area of any waxes, polishes, anything like that. If the scratch is deep enough or you're working on a metal part and you've seen a little bit of rust in there, get you a precision pick or screwdriver like this, and you're gonna wanna get down into the middle of that scratch. If the scratch has been on there for a while and you've waxed your bike, you've got waxes and polishes and stuff like that in that scratch, and the touch-up paint will not stick very well if you've got polishes and wax in there. So you have to take a precision pick or screwdriver, something. I have a very, very fine tipped screwdriver here. And I'm just gonna scrape this. I'm gonna scrape that scratch out just to make sure that there's no waxes and polishes in there. Once I do that, I'm gonna do the rubbing alcohol one more time. I'm gonna clean that area up. So when it comes to this paint, your first initial drop is going to come when you push on that ball. And I like to just get a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard, and keep pressing it until I start seeing paint on the paper. Very, very little is released when you push on this, but we don't want to push on it for the first time and just gob that scratch up with a bunch of paint. Then I'm just going to line my pen up with that scratch and just make little bitty dots going all the way across that scratch until we feel like it's completely full of paint. I'm gonna make sure that you get the edges really well. Now, you can already see most of the white is gone from there. We've got the scratch filled in. You don't see the primer, you don't see the ABS, and you can keep doing it. You're not using very much paint at all. But you can keep doing this until you're satisfied with it. Now, once you have it filled in like that, you can see the different angles of the light are actually making you see that scratch. Even though it's filled in, it's raised just a little bit. So this is where we're gonna let this dry, and you can actually just leave it like this, or you can come back and do your little wet sanding and polishing. If I get this up in here, you can see this pretty good gouge right here. So I've already had this clean, so I'm gonna take my rubbing alcohol. I'm gonna clean this area up. This is an ABS part, so I know that there's no rust in there. We will look with our precision pin, our screwdriver, just kind of give it a couple of little scrapes through there just to make sure that the paint has something to stick to besides wax. Take a rubbing alcohol again, clean this up. Now we got the amber whiskey, so we're gonna take our paint pen once again. We're gonna dab on paper or cardboard until we get this good flow going from the paint pen. And if you can't get it flowing real good right off the bat, go ahead and release this, give it some air, screw it back on, and go at it again. Sometimes you can get a better paint flow just by getting some air in there. And hopefully there, you can see the scratch that we're working with. When I pull it back here, my lights are kind of getting in the way. I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna dab paint in, start at one end. We're just gonna dab it in and work our way across the scratch. Now with this scratch being all the way down to the black plastic and not just to the primer, your primer's a lighter color. So when you put color over the top of that gray primer, it gives you a different kind of colored look. Now since this one was all the way down to the black, and we're just introducing just a little bit of paint right on top of that, you can still kind of see through the paint, and it's making that appear darker. So what you want to do is just go ahead and let this dry again, and then we'll come back and add another coat until we get it exactly how we want it. Then we'll do our little wet sand and our polish, and it should be about as good as it's going to get. You could probably just get away with leaving it like that. Now you don't have a black mark on there, and it's filled in with paint. So from here, it's going to help cause it from cracking or chipping anymore because you've introduced paint to all of those cracked edges. When I'm filling in, I'm just pushing in a straight line across that scratch, or whatever shape your scratch is. If you have a rock chip and it's just a hole, then you just go around the border of the hole and push in until you get it filled in. So I'm not dragging the paint with the metal tip, but what I'm doing is adding small dots, one right next to each other, just following the line of the scratch until we have it filled in. Now when you get done with your paint pen, take some paint thinner on a rag and go ahead and clean up that tip and keep that tip clean. Then it'll be clog free the next time that you use it. Now to just do a little color sand on it, we're gonna make sure that our sandpaper is wet, our part is wet. We're just gonna lightly, very, very lightly go over these two rock chips that we filled in. Once we get that about as smooth as we can get it, we're gonna dry it off really good. On this, I've used a product called the Last Cut. It's a compound glaze. You can pick this up online. It's actually a dual action polish is what it is. So the first is a compound. It's going to remove those light scratches that we just put in the clear coat with the sandpaper. And then as that product works, it breaks down into a polish. And all we have done is just remove those high spots on that painted area. It got rid of the two spots where we could actually see the light gray primer underneath it. And also, like I said, if this was metal, you've just protected that metal from ever rusting or that actually getting water under that paint and chipping that off over time. Even with the ABS, just getting the paint in those holes is going to protect the edges of that chip. And what that's going to do is prevent any other damage that you could receive over time on a cracked painted edge. So that's pretty much it on the paint pen products. We kind of covered a couple of different ways of doing it, actually just touching it up, getting it filled in so you don't see it as bad, leaving it alone. The other method was a little bit more advanced where we went in and did a little bit of wet sanding and we knocked those edges down just to keep light reflections off of that chip. If you don't feel comfortable doing the wet sanding and the polishing and stuff like that, just simply do not do it. The best thing that you can do for a rock chip or a scratch, especially on metal products, is to get that filled in so it doesn't have rust. Rust builds, water builds, it sets in that hole, it starts moving underneath the paint and you're gonna start having paint chips flying off everywhere. So that's basically what you want to avoid. Not only does the paint pen get rid of the unsightly scratch, for the most part, it actually helps the product so you don't get any further damage. So like I said, all of the colors will be available on the Avanblack website. These are just a few of the samples that we have here today. And I just want to get a quick video out to you to let you see how the product works and what to expect when you're using any kind of touch-up paint. And it doesn't matter if you use ours or if you buy Harley Davidson's or any other third-party touch-up paint pen, you're going to get about the same results. It is what it is. Like I said in the beginning of the video, it's a touch-up pen. So it's never going to be 100% perfect, like the scratch was never there. So if you have any questions on these whatsoever, you guys know the deal. Comment section down below. I'll try to help you the best that I can. I'm going to get out of here and get myself back to work. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, as always, be safe, keep your knees in the breeze.